The day I got fined for fishing in my own backyard lake started just like any other quiet, peaceful, and with a fat rainbow trout on the line. I was halfway through reeling it in when I heard the unmistakable sound of flip-flops slapping too aggressively down the gravel path. That could only mean one thing. "Yorick O'Connell," came the screech, nasal and full of fake authority. I didn't even bother turning my head. "Morning, Tabitha Velman," I said, still focused on the fight at the end of my line. "I've told you before. That lake is a shared amenity under HOA jurisdiction. You can't just fish whenever you feel like it." I yanked the trout out of the water and held it up. "Funny, Tabitha, I don't see no fishing signs and this lake is right behind my property. Been fishing here for 20 years. Tabitha, the HOA president with the personality of a soggy rice cake, stuck a manicured finger in my face. "Well, as of last week, the board passed a new resolution. No fishing without an HOA-issued permit, and since you don't have one, you'll be receiving a fine." She stormed off before I could say another word, her little clipboard bouncing against her hip like it was a weapon. Sure enough, 2 days later I got a letter taped to my door. Not mailed, taped. Classic HOA move. Violation. Unauthorized use of HOA-managed lake. Fine, $400. It wasn't about the money. It was the principle. I pay my dues. I take care of my property. I even mow the sidewalk strip nobody else touches. And now they're gonna fine me for fishing. I wasn't about to let that slide. I drove straight down to the county records office and pulled up the land surveys. And that's when I found my golden ticket. The lake wasn't owned by the HOA. It was split across 5 properties, mine included. The HOA technically had 0 jurisdiction over it. I double-checked, triple-checked, even had a buddy of mine who's a zoning attorney look it over. "Yorick," he said, grinning, "you could build a floating hot dog stand on that lake and HOA Karen over there couldn't do a damn thing about it." I didn't build a hot dog stand. I built a fishing dock. Then I bought 5 aluminum rowboats, cleared the brush, put up a fresh sign. "O'Connell Lake Fishing Resort Day Pass, $15, and just beneath it, HOA members not exempt, no pass, no entry within a week." I had people coming in from all over the neighborhood. Retirees, kids with their dads, even a couple from 2 streets over who brought their own rods and lawn chairs. My next-door neighbor, Hank, a guy who hadn't said more than 10 words to me in 5 years, offered to help me build a bait shed. And then Tabitha showed up again, this time with 2 HOA board members flanking her like a budget security team. "You can't charge people to use the HOA lake," she barked. I handed her a laminated copy of the land ownership map. "Not an HOA lake. This section, mine. This dock, mine. The water touching my land, still mine." Her face turned the color of boiled ham. "This is outrageous. You're exploiting the community." "No," I said, looking around at the dozen or so people fishing peacefully. "I'm giving them something you never could: freedom to enjoy their own neighborhood without being harassed." She stormed off again, but this time I knew she was going to try something bigger. And I was ready. I didn't have to wait long before the real retaliation began. 3 mornings later, I woke to the sound of metal scraping across pavement. From my bedroom window, I spotted a crew of 4 men in orange vests unloading fencing panels from a flatbed trailer. They were setting up along the lake's edge on my side without speaking to anyone. One of them had a clipboard. Another had a post driver. I walked down in my slippers, coffee in hand. "Morning," I said, standing between them and the lake. "What's the plan here?" The guy with the clipboard didn't look up. "Installing a safety barrier, HOA request. Said it's for liability reasons." "Whose property are you on?" He paused, eyes scanning the sheet. 1145 Lakeside." "That's mine." He stopped writing. "Got a work order signed by me?" I asked. He shifted, suddenly unsure of himself. "We were told this was common property." "It's not." "You're trespassing," I said, raising my phone. "I suggest you pack up before the sheriff gets here." The crew chief didn't argue. He waved the others off, muttering about how they were just following instructions. 10 minutes later, they were gone. But the seed was planted. The HOA wasn't going to back down. They were escalating. I walked straight into my garage, pulled out the game camera I used during deer season, and mounted it onto the tall oak overlooking the dock. Then I installed a second one under the eaves of my bait shed, pointed directly at the shoreline where the fence crew had tried setting up. If they were going to start playing dirty, I'd be recording every move. That night, I filed a formal complaint with the county zoning office, attaching the footage and property documents. The next morning, I got a call from a county investigator named Marta Rivera, who sounded more amused than concerned. "They tried to classify your dock as an unpermitted structure on HOA land," she said. "But according to GIS records, your parcel clearly includes that entire shoreline." "Then they filed a false report," I said. "They did," she replied. "And we take that seriously." And that's when it all started to unravel for them. Marta launched a formal inquiry. It turns out Tabitha had submitted forged diagrams with altered boundaries that made the lake appear as entirely community-owned. She even included a fake letter from a title company claiming the HOA had acquired rights to the shoreline. County records showed no such transfer. I wasn't surprised. But what came next? That caught me off guard. A week later, I came home to find a package on my porch. No return address. Inside was a flash drive. Just a plain black USB stick wrapped in a napkin. I plugged it into my laptop cautiously, fully expecting some malware or a cheesy threat video. Instead, there were video files, dozens of them. Each one captured from what looked like a hidden camera inside the HOA's clubhouse meeting room. In grainy black and white footage, I saw Tabitha and 3 board members discussing ways to reclaim the lake. One clip showed them reviewing my property lines, aware they didn't have legal claim. Another showed them instructing a man named Richard, one of the board members, to doctor the maps for the county submission. And then came the kicker. In one file, Tabitha said, "If O'Connell doesn't back down, we'll fine him out of his mortgage. That lake's too valuable to let him turn it into some hillbilly bait shack." I copied every file to a secure drive, then called Marta again. Within 24 hours, a criminal investigator from the sheriff's office was at my house. His name was Deputy Langford, a guy with a thick mustache and the posture of someone who'd been through too many town hall meetings. "I've seen HOA overreach," he said, watching one of the videos on my laptop. "But forging documents and launching a coordinated harassment campaign, that's criminal conspiracy." 2 days later, the county issued subpoenas. Tabitha and the 3 board members were served at their homes during dinner. I didn't watch it happen, but I heard about it from Hank, who'd been out walking his dog. "They tried to act like it was all a misunderstanding," he told me, chuckling. But Tabitha's face looked like she'd bitten into a lemon made of fire. The HOA tried to spin it, of course. They held an emergency meeting in the clubhouse, trying to drum up support from the community. I went. The room was packed. Folding chairs in neat rows, lemonade on the back table, and the air thick with tension. Tabitha stood at the front, flanked by the remaining board members who hadn't been subpoenaed. She wore a blazer 2 sizes too bold and clutched a stack of papers like they were life preservers. "We are here tonight to clarify the allegations being circulated by a certain resident," she began. "There has been a misunderstanding involving county records and property lines. We intend to cooperate fully with any inquiries and continue serving this community responsibly." I raised my hand. She ignored me. I stood up anyway. "You mean the misunderstanding where you forged documents and tried to steal private land?" I said, "because I've got footage. Every resident here is welcome to come by my place and watch it. Bring popcorn." A low murmur spread across the room. Tabitha's jaw twitched. "You're out of order, Mr. O'Connell." "No, you're out of office," I replied. "After what you pulled, you think anyone here's going to let you run this place another day?" Murmurs turned to nods. Then claps. Then full-blown applause. By the end of the week, a petition circulated for a recall vote. Over 70% of residents signed it. Tabitha and her cronies were officially removed from their positions. An interim committee was put in place, mostly made up of folks who'd fished off my dock and enjoyed the lake without drama. But it didn't stop there. The county filed charges: falsifying public documents, attempted fraud, criminal harassment. Tabitha's case made the local paper front page. Her mugshot didn't do her any favors. As for me, I upgraded the dock. Added solar-powered lanterns, a few benches, and a hand-painted sign by Hank's granddaughter that read "O'Connell's Landing a Lake for Everyone." The bait shed became a full-service shack with cold drinks, tackle rentals, and a corkboard where kids could pin photos of their biggest catches. One afternoon, as I was restocking worms, Marta Rivera stopped by. "Thought I'd see what all the fuss was about," she said, holding a rod. $15, I said. She laughed and handed over a 20. "Keep the change." We stood by the water, quiet for a moment. The sun was starting to dip, casting long shadows across the lake. A couple of kids yelled in triumph nearby as one pulled up a smallmouth base. "You turned a mess into a community," Marta said. "No," I replied, watching the lake ripple. "They just needed someone to stop the nonsense long enough to remember what community feels like." 2 weeks after the recall vote, the lake was busier than I'd ever seen it. Families were setting up folding chairs, kids were catching bluegill on bread balls, and even retirees started trading fishing tips beside the bait shack. I'd added a sandwich cooler and a shaded bench under the old elm tree. Business was steady and, more importantly, peaceful. Then a white sedan with tinted windows rolled up and parked across the street from my property. A man in a navy blazer stepped out, holding a leather portfolio and scanning the lake like he was counting every blade of grass. He walked right up to me, shoes crunching on gravel. "You Mr. O'Connell?" he asked, tone clipped and professional. I nodded, wiping my hands on a towel. "Depends who you are." "Elliot Ferris, representing the state attorney's office. I need to speak with you about the ongoing investigation into the former HOA board." I motioned toward the dock. "We can talk out here. Just watch your step. The planks near the end get slick after rain." Elliot followed me, balancing like he'd never seen a dock before, much less walked one. We stopped near the edge where the breeze kept the bugs off. "We've been reviewing the footage and documents you submitted," he said, flipping open his folder. "But something new has come up. During discovery, County Tech Support located deleted correspondence on the HOA's internal email server. Some of those emails reference financial transfers to a personal account under Tabitha Velman's name. These weren't dues or reimbursements. They were coded as special project funds." I raised an eyebrow. "Meaning what, exactly?" "Meaning someone was laundering HOA funds, possibly tens of thousands. And we have reason to believe they were planning to acquire private land through fraudulent claims, then flip it to a real estate broker tied to one of the board members." That took a second to settle in. "So this wasn't just about the lake?" "No," Elliot said. "That was the start. But they'd identified 5 parcels around this area they intended to seize or pressure into selling, yours being the first." I leaned against the railing. "And they thought fining me for fishing would be enough to scare me off." Elliot looked out over the water. "They underestimated you. We'll be filing additional charges: wire fraud, conspiracy, possibly even racketeering, depending on how deep this goes." He handed me a formal document, a witness notification. I was being added to the case as a key witness with an expected court date 2 months out. That night, I locked up the shack early and sat on the porch with a beer, watching the sun drop behind the trees. The lake shimmered under the last light of the day. I thought about how close I'd come to losing it all to a group of people who saw the neighborhood as something to carve up and sell. The next morning, I met with the newly formed HOA interim committee at the community center. The mood was cautious but earnest. The acting chair, a retired architect named June McAllister, opened the meeting with a clipboard full of handwritten notes. "We want to establish clear boundaries," she began. "Not just physical ones, but legal and procedural. The last board operated without checks, and we're not letting that happen again." I leaned forward. Start with transparency. Every budget item gets posted. Every vote gets minutes. And no more secret meetings, June nodded. We've also drafted new bylaws. One of them disbands the enforcement committee entirely. If someone's got an issue, it goes through mediation first. That got a round of approval from the residents in the room. I offered to hold a lakeside meeting once a month, open to anyone, where people could voice concerns without the formality. The idea caught on fast. Within a week, we had local high schoolers volunteering to paint new signage around the neighborhood. Someone donated a bench for the front of the bait shack. A group of veterans offered to patrol the area at night to make sure nothing shady happened again. Then came the subpoena for my official deposition. I arrived at the county courthouse on a rainy Thursday, escorted to a small conference room where 2 attorneys and a court reporter waited. Elliot was already there, flipping through a thick binder. He gestured for me to sit. They're trying to plead down. But the DA wants to make an example. For the next 3 hours, I answered questions under oath about the forged maps, the fake permit attempt, the video files, the attempted fencing, the county complaint, every detail laid out in a clear chronological timeline. When it was done, Elliot stood and shook my hand. You've done a lot more than defend your own land. You've taken apart a machine that's been quietly running unchecked for years. 2 weeks later, Tabitha was indicted on 6 felony counts. Richard and the other 2 board members faced 3 each. They were arrested at their homes again, but this time, it made the regional news. The footage of Tabitha being let out in handcuffs, raincoat pulled over her head, played on every local channel. Meanwhile, the neighborhood was changing. One of the younger couples, the Parkers, started a community garden on the vacant lot beside the clubhouse. A carpenter down the block built a little library box near the walking trail. And someone anonymously left a dozen fishing rods by the dock with a note that read, "For the next generation." One afternoon, I was restocking drinks in the bait shack when a woman wandered in, looking lost and holding a clipboard. "You Mr. O'Connell?" she asked. "Depends who you are," I replied, half joking. She smiled. "Jessica Tanaka. I'm with a documentary series. We're doing a segment on neighborhood justice. County records pointed us here." I blinked. "You're kidding," she laughed. "Not even a little. Your story's got everything. Corruption, community resilience, and a lake that sparked it all. Would you be willing to talk on camera?" I didn't answer right away. I looked out at the dock where a kid was helping his sister bait a hook with a chunk of hot dog. The lake rippled in the breeze. It looked nothing like the battleground it had been just weeks ago. It looked like home again. "Sure," I said, "but only if you bring a rod. You're not leaving without trying the water." She laughed, scribbled something on her clipboard, and promised to return with her crew the following week. By the time they showed up, the whole neighborhood knew. People came out just to watch the filming, some holding up signs that read, "Team O'Connell" and "No more fines, just lines." One guy brought a grill and started handing out hot dogs to anyone nearby. The documentary crew filmed for 2 days. They interviewed residents, recorded the lake at golden hour, and even got footage of the courthouse with the charges displayed across the screen. When it aired the following month, it went viral, shared across social media, picked up by local networks, and eventually featured in a segment about homeowner rights reform. A state senator called me personally to thank me for exposing the loopholes, and said they were drafting a bill requiring third-party oversight of HOA boards in the state. I didn't care much for politics, but I told him what I told everyone else. I just didn't want to pay $400 to catch a fish. He laughed, said he'd send me a copy of the bill when it passed. Later that week, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just a folded sheet of paper inside. It read, "You didn't just win, you changed everything." And at the bottom, a single signature, Richard, the former HOA board member. I stared at it for a long time. The next morning, I opened the dock early. The sun was barely up, the water calm and glassy. I set out a couple of rods, filled the cooler, and waited, not for trouble this time, just for the first bite. The first sign that the story was reaching beyond our little lake came when a man in a green flannel shirt arrived and paid for a day pass with a crisp 50. He didn't fish. He just walked the dock slowly, hands clasped behind his back, watching the water like it held answers to a question he hadn't asked yet. When I asked where he was from, he said, 4 counties over, I just had to see it for myself. By then, the fishing resort had taken on a life of its own. Not a business, not really, more like a statement. A warning. A turning point. People who'd never cared about property lines or HOA meetings were suddenly quoting ordinances and checking county maps. And that's when something unexpected happened. One of the newly elected board members, a soft-spoken retired postal worker named Carla, approached me with a folder and a look that said she hadn't slept well. "We found something," she said, handing it over. In the storage closet behind the clubhouse furnace, it was taped under a drawer. Inside the folder were receipts, dozens of them. Not just fake invoices or padded reimbursements, these were signed checks from the HOA's operating account made out to a private contractor registered in Delaware. The name didn't ring any bells, but the amounts were staggering. One for $17,000 marked landscape beautification. Another for $22,000 labeled waterway maintenance. "None of that ever happened," Carla murmured. "We don't even have irrigation." I flipped through the rest. The dates lined up suspiciously well with the board's push to reclaim the lake. One of the check stubs even included a note. "Phase 1 survey prep." Carla looked up. "We think it's a shell company, and we think Tabitha was funneling money into it through a middleman." I nodded. "Then it's time we find out who." We arranged a meeting with the county investigator, Marta, and Deputy Langford. They took one look at the receipts and called in a state financial crimes unit. Within 48 hours, they traced the Delaware Corporation to a P.O. box in Stamford, and from there to an LLC registered to a man named Dwayne Elgin. Wayne was a former real estate consultant who'd been disbarred from holding a broker's license 6 years ago for manipulating property assessments. He also happened to be Tabitha's cousin. At that point, the case was no longer just a matter of local fraud. The state attorney general's office stepped in, opening a wider probe into misuse of HOA funds across multiple neighborhoods. Apparently, our HOA wasn't the only one Dwayne had been involved in. They were siphoning money from HOA accounts, Elliot explained during a follow-up meeting in the courthouse. Using fake invoices, laundering it through Dwayne's company, and attempting to secure land to flip quietly to developers. Your fishing fine was just the beginning. The state brought charges against Dwayne for wire fraud, conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, and operating a fraudulent business entity. He was arrested in Connecticut 2 nights later with over $200,000 in cashier's checks in his suitcase and a plane ticket to Costa Rica. With that, the web fully unraveled. The interim board voted unanimously to dissolve all contracts initiated by the previous leadership. A forensic auditor was brought in to comb through the HOA's books. Residents were refunded improperly levied fines, including mine, with interest. The bait shack got a surprise inspection from the county, not to shut it down but to officially license it as a seasonal food stand. Apparently, someone up the chain thought it was a clever adaptive reuse of private shoreline. Meanwhile, the community transformed. A math teacher named Lavinia organized weekend cleanup crews to restore the walking trails. A group of teenagers painted over the HOA's old signage with colorful murals, each one themed after native fish species. The lake wasn't just a backdrop anymore. It was the neighborhood's beating heart. And then something happened I never expected. I got an invitation to speak at a regional housing conference. The theme was Community Governance Reform, Lessons from the Ground. They'd heard about the fishing dock, the camera footage, the forged maps, and the fake contractor. They wanted me to share how it all unraveled and how a bunch of regular folks managed to take their neighborhood back. I didn't want to go at first. I wasn't a speaker. I was just a guy who liked fishing and didn't like being pushed around, but Hank convinced me. "If you don't tell the story," he said, "they'll just keep writing the same one in other places." The conference was held in a hotel ballroom 2 counties south. I wore my cleanest button-up and stood behind a wooden podium while a room full of city planners, lawyers, and homeowners stared back. I told them everything, not just the lake, not just the fines. Everything, the fear of losing property, the bitterness of being ignored, the slow burning anger that comes from being told your rights don't matter. And the relief, the pure, unfiltered relief of watching the people who lied to your face finally get held accountable. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then someone clapped, then another, then the whole room stood. Afterward, a lawyer from the state bar approached me with a proposal to develop a homeowner bill of rights to distribute to communities across the region. I told her I'd help, as long as it didn't interfere with fishing season. Back home, things settled into a new rhythm. The lake was still busy but calmer, less crowded, more familiar. People no longer came just to see the spot where it all happened. They came because it had become something better, a place they felt part of. A few months later, I stood beside Marta and Langford on the courthouse steps as the verdicts came in. Tabitha was found guilty on 5 felony counts, sentenced to 6 years with mandatory restitution. Dwayne got 8. Richard and the others took plea deals and were barred from serving on any housing board again. The new HOA charter was ratified the following week. It included term limits, mandatory transparency audits, and a clause banning any attempt to reinterpret private property lines without unanimous consent from affected homeowners. Carla was elected president, though she still insisted on delivering letters in person, just without the clipboard and attitude. As for me, I kept the dock open. I no longer charged for fishing during the week. Saturdays and Sundays were still pass-based, but we kept it affordable. The money went into a community fund managed by a committee of 5 neighbors I trusted. We used it for projects: benches, lights, trail markers, and a shaded reading nook for kids near the shoreline. On the 1-year anniversary of the day I first got that fine, the whole neighborhood threw a potluck at the lake. Someone made a cake shaped like a fish. Someone else brought a cardboard cutout of Tabitha and tossed it in the recycling bin ceremoniously. I stood with Hank on the dock, watching the sun dip below the trees. "You gonna hang it up now?" he asked, sipping his iced tea. "Call it a win?" I shook my head. "Nah, there'll always be someone who thinks rules are for other people, but now we've got a blueprint. And a lake full of folks who know how to use it." He chuckled. "Well, just don't start charging for the tea. Only if you start charging for the jokes." We stood there a while longer, listening to the laughter, the splash of fish breaking the surface, the faint hum of music drifting from the shore. The war was over. The lake was ours. And no one, not a forged document, not a crooked board, not a distant cousin with a fake LLC, was ever going to take it again.